Before I dive into this tale of passion, pride, and redemption, let me ask, where are you joining me from today? Drop a comment below, and while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a heartbeat of these captivating stories unfolding before us. Karoline Leavitt, a radiant 27-year-old with a fire in her soul, stepped into the gleaming sanctuary of Capital Luxury Motors in Washington, D.C. She was no ordinary woman. She was the youngest White House press secretary in history, a fierce voice for the Trump administration, her spirit as unyielding as the steel of the cars she admired. After a long, bruising day at the White House, she carried herself with grace, her white button-up shirt crisp against her black dress pants, low heels clicking softly on the marble floor. Around her neck hung a delicate MAGA necklace, a quiet emblem of her unwavering beliefs, shimmering like a secret whispered in the wind. She wasn't just there for a car, she sought the Azure Coupe, a midnight blue masterpiece worth $285,000, its sharp lines and roaring V8 engine, a perfect match for her relentless drive. It wasn't merely a vehicle, it was a bold declaration to the left-wing media that hounded her daily, a symbol of her refusal to bow under their scorn. The dealership, nestled in the pulsing heart of D.C., catered to the city's political elite. Porsches, Bentleys, and Ferraris gleamed behind glass walls, their polished surfaces reflecting the ambitions of power players. The air was thick with the scent of new leather and costly cologne, a playground for the privileged. As Karoline pushed through the glass doors, a gentle chime sang her arrival, and the vast showroom sparkled under LED lights. A fiery red Porsche 911. Turbo roared silently in one corner. A glossy black Bentley Continental purred in another, and a blazing yellow Ferrari SF90 perched atop a pedestal like a golden idol. Her eyes, however, locked onto the Azure Coupe. Its deep blue hue called to her like a lover's gaze across a crowded room, promising strength and elegance in every curve. A young voice broke her reverie. "Hello, ma'am. How can I assist you?" Daniel, a fresh-faced 25-year-old in a slightly oversized suit, approached with a shy smile, his eagerness as endearing as a puppy's wagging tail. "I'd like to see that Azure Coupe," Karoline replied, her voice steady yet warm, pointing to her prize. Daniel nodded, his words tumbling out in a rush. "It's got a V8 engine, hand-stitched leather interior. Perfect for—" But before he could finish, a shadow loomed over them. "I'll take it from here, Daniel," came a smooth, cutting interruption. Blake Thompson, the sales manager, strode forward. Tall, broad, and nearing 40, his expensive gray suit clung to him like a second skin, his slick-back hair gleaming with arrogance. His eyes, cold and smug, raked over Karoline from head to toe, not with admiration but with disdain, as if she were a stain on his pristine world. "Hello," he drawled, his voice dripping with false honey. "I'm Blake Thompson, manager here. What are you looking for?" Karoline met his stare unflinchingly. "I want to see the Azure Coupe." Blake smirked, stepping between her and the car like a gatekeeper, barring entry to paradise. "You sure? This is a limited edition. Not just anyone can buy it," he said, his tone laced with mockery, a dagger wrapped in silk. Karoline's brow furrowed, a flicker of irritation sparking in her chest. "I know what it is. I want to see the interior." Blake crossed his arms, scoffing, the sound harsh against the showroom's polished silence. "You look familiar. Hold on." He tilted his head, then his eyes widened with cruel delight. "Oh, I remember now. You're Karoline Leavitt, right? Trump's press secretary." He spat Trump like a curse, his voice rising, drawing curious glances from nearby customers. Karoline nodded, her expression a fortress of calm. "That's right. I need this car for work." Blake's laugh erupted, a jagged blade slicing through the air. "Work? You mean racing to press briefings to defend dusty old policies? I thought you were just good at spinning tariffs and border walls. Didn't peg you for dreaming of luxury cars." He turned to Daniel with a wink. "Hear that? MAGA knows how to play fancy, too." Daniel's head dipped, his discomfort palpable, but he stayed mute. Karoline stood taller, her voice a steady flame. "I'm not dreaming. I want to buy it today. Can you show me the car?" Blake's laughter faded, but his smirk lingered like a storm cloud. He leaned closer, his tone patronizing, as if speaking to a wayward child. Listen, Miss Leavitt, I don't know where you get your money. Probably MAGA donations, right? But this is Capital Luxury Motors. We serve clients with taste, with social awareness, not flashy conservatives. Social awareness? Karoline echoed, her voice sharpening like a blade kissed by fire. You mean refusing customers based on politics? I need a car to do my job efficiently, not to please you or anyone else. Blake shrugged, unfazed, his smugness a wall she couldn't breach. Efficiently with Trump? I don't think this car fits your image. What are you going to do? Polish his brand with it? Caroline's fist clenched, but her composure held, forged in the crucible of facing down leftist reporters. You don't need to care what I use it for. I'm a customer. I have money. I want to see the car. That's it. Blake stepped back, eyeing her as if she'd sprouted wings. Money? You're serious? Coming in here with that outfit and that cheap necklace? Who do you think you are to demand an azure coupe? Whispers rippled through the showroom. A couple near the Ferrari turned to stare. Two salespeople murmured, one chuckling. Daniel stood frozen, eyes on the floor, wishing the marble would swallow him whole. Blake's arms crossed tighter, his gaze a dare. Look, Miss Leavitt, I don't have time for MAGA stunts. If you want a car, book an appointment like a normal person. Otherwise, try somewhere else. Tesla, maybe. Better for the environment. Karoline met his eyes, her voice low but resonant, a quiet storm gathering strength. I don't need your suggestions. I want this car. Blake's icy stare locked with hers, his arms a barricade across his chest. Don't you get it? This is my turf, and I say no, he hissed, his contempt no longer veiled. Karoline, in her simple white shirt and black pants, stood unshaken, her eyes as fierce as when she faced the White House press corps. Your turf, she replied, her tone a velvet glove over steel. I thought this was a dealership, not a political club. I have money. I want to buy the Azure Coupe. What's your reason for refusing me? Blake's dry laugh cut through the tension like a whip. Reason? You're seriously asking that? Look at you. That cheap MAGA necklace. That attitude like you own the world. You're Trump's people, and we don't welcome your kind here. Karoline's brow creased, but her composure held like a lighthouse in a tempest. My money's as good as anyone's in the showroom. You can't refuse me just because you don't like Trump. Blake leaned down, his face inches from hers, his breath bitter with coffee and bile. Oh, I can, Miss Leavitt. This is a private business. I decide who gets served, and I don't want dirty MAGA money tainting this place. The whispers grew louder. A man in a blue suit near the Bentley murmured to his wife, Who is she? Trump's press secretary. I've seen her on TV, she replied. A blonde salesperson giggled, whispering, Blake's teaching her a lesson. Daniel clutched a brochure, his face flushed, too timid to intervene. Karoline drew a deep breath, her voice hardening into iron. Dirty money? You're talking about what I earn representing millions of Americans. By not serving me, you're insulting them. Blake shrugged, turning to the gathering crowd with theatrical flair. Listen up, everyone, he boomed, his voice echoing like a ringmaster's call. Miss Leavitt here wants to use MAGA money to buy our cars. I bet she'd slap a Trump flag on it and parade around D.C. Do we need customers like that? Laughter erupted from the corner. The man near the Bentley nodded, his wife giggling behind her hand. But not all agreed. An older woman in a gray sweater frowned. She just wants to buy a car. What's wrong with that? Blake ignored her, pointing at the glass doors. You heard them. This isn't your place. I don't care if you're press secretary or whatever. Get out now. Karoline didn't flinch. I'm a customer, not a troublemaker. You have no legal grounds to kick me out. Blake stepped closer, so near she could see the creases of arrogance etched on his forehead. Grounds? I don't like you. That's enough. This is my turf, and I say you don't belong. Leave, or I'll call security. His finger jabbed toward the door, his voice rising with defiance. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on Karoline. She scanned the room. Some faces smirked, others shifted uneasily. She could call a lawyer, turn this into a war of principle, but not today. Fine, she said. her voice a low, clear bell tolling a promise. You want me gone? I'll go. But this isn't over. She turned, her heels clicking a steady rhythm on the marble, a melody of resolve. Blake's loud laugh chased her. Say hi to Trump for me. Get an electric car. It's more modern. A few more chuckles followed, but Daniel muttered under his breath, This isn't right, as Karoline pushed through the doors. Sunlight bathed her small, steadfast silhouette, her hand gripping her phone, lips pressed tight. Blake thought he'd triumphed, that he'd schooled the MAGA crowd. He didn't know she wasn't leaving broken. She was leaving with a vow burning in her heart. Outside, Karoline slid into her old silver Toyota Camry, its faded paint a humble contrast to the showroom's opulence. The late afternoon sun dimmed over Capital Luxury Motors, but within her, a quiet ember glowed. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, Blake's mocking echo, Get an electric car, ringing in her ears. She took a slow breath, pulled her phone from her pocket, and dialed. The line rang twice before a deep, raspy voice answered, laced with warmth. Karoline, you okay? Nicholas, she said, her tone low but steady. I just got kicked out of a dealership in D.C. On the other end, Nicholas Rio, her husband, fell silent. She pictured him in his home office. Salt and pepper hair tousled, dark brown eyes narrowing with protective fire. At 59, he'd risen from homelessness to helm Rio Enterprises, LLC, a multi-million-dollar real estate empire in New England. He wasn't quick to rage, but for Karoline, his love was a lion's roar. Kicked out? His voice dropped, edged with fury. Who dared do that to you? Karoline started the car, its faint hum a soft companion as she pulled from the lot. The manager, Blake Thompson. He recognized me as Trump's press secretary, refused to sell me a car because I'm MAGA, called my money dirty, said I didn't belong, humiliated me in front of everyone. She recounted the jabs, the Trump sneers, the final, get out or I'll call security. Her voice calm but threaded with frustration. I wanted the Azure coupe for work, to move between the White House and briefings, but he turned it into a circus. Nicholas exhaled sharply, a gust through the phone. What did he say? She repeated Blake's venom, stopping at a red light, fingers tapping the wheel. I pushed back, said my money's as good as anyone's, but he didn't care. Used private business rights to kick me out. Mocked the president, too. Bastard, Nicholas muttered, his voice a low growl. She heard his leather chair creak. He'd likely stood, pacing their suburban D.C. home. A faint smile tugged at her lips. She knew him too well. From sleeping on park benches in Hampton Beach to owning millions in property, Nicholas had proposed to her under a New Hampshire sky, and months after their son, Nicholas Nico Robert, was born, he'd vowed to shield his family with every fiber of his being. Who does he think he is, insulting you like that? Nicholas's voice rose. You're the White House press secretary, representing the president, and he calls your money dirty? Does he know how hard you work? Karoline merged onto the highway, city lights twinkling like stars in the distance. He doesn't care, Nicholas. To him, I'm everything he hates. Trump, MAGA, all of it. He wanted to shame me, to feel superior. Nicholas went quiet, then asked, What do you want me to do? Karoline pursed her lips, weighing her choices. Lawsuit, media storm, or letting it fade. But surrender wasn't in her blood. I don't want revenge, she said slowly, but I want him to see his mistake. He thinks I'm weak, a young woman, a Trump supporter. I want him to realize his liberalism doesn't give him the right to crush people. Nicholas chuckled, a deep, meaningful sound. All right, I know what to do. Karoline frowned. What do you mean? Just head home, he replied, his tone firm. Tomorrow I'll go there. He won't forget that day. She heard him moving, perhaps to the garage where their $1.5 million Rolls-Royce Phantom, a deep red, echoing MAGA's fire, waited. Nicholas, don't overdo it, she warned, though she knew he rarely heeded caution when riled. Overdo it? He teased, mischief dancing in his voice. I just want to show him how wrong he was to mess with my wife. You're Karoline Leavitt. No one disrespects you. She laughed softly, her first since the showroom. All right, but I want every detail later. Don't worry, he said. I'll tell you everything. Now go home, Nico's waiting. Karoline drove her weathered Camry through DC's suburban streets, its headlights sweeping the quiet night. Nicholas's words, "Tomorrow I'll go there. He won't forget that day," echoed with resolve, and a faint smile curved her lips as she brushed her MAGA necklace. Blake had humiliated her, not just for her role, but for daring to belong in his world. Nicholas's plan was no jest, and she trusted the storm brewing in his heart. She turned into their two-story villa, a discreet haven far humbler than his New Hampshire estates. Parking in the garage, she stepped inside, kicking off her heels. The living room glowed softly, and in the small office, Nicholas sat in a leather chair, a whiskey glass in hand, eyes on his phone. His gray shirt hugged his broad frame, salt and pepper hair mussed, blueprints of Rio Enterprises scattered across the desk. He looked up as she entered, standing swiftly. "You're back," he said, his deep brown eyes flashing with concern and simmering anger. Tall and rugged at 59, he still bore the strength of his struggling days. "Nico's asleep upstairs. You okay?" Karoline sank into the sofa, nodding. "I'm fine, but I can't stop thinking about the dealership. Blake didn't just refuse me. He wanted to break me, to prove his liberal ideals trumped mine." Nicholas gripped his glass, knuckles whitening. "He thinks he's nobler than you because he hates Trump?" He set the glass down, his voice a low rumble. "I'm not letting this slide easily." Karoline tilted her head. "I told you, I don't want revenge. I want him to see his error, not be ruined." Nicholas's mischievous smile bloomed, the one she'd fallen for years ago. "I'm not buying the dealership to fire him, though I could, but I'll make him remember tomorrow." He waved her to follow. "Come here, I'll show you what I'm using." She trailed him through the dim hallway to the garage where lights flickered on, revealing the Rolls-Royce Phantom, a $1.5 million beast, its deep red paint a fiery echo of their shared values. Bespoke beige leather glowing within, chrome wheels glinting like stars. Nicholas patted the hood, pride in his voice. "I had it custom-made last year, after Nico was born. Tomorrow I'm driving it to Capital Luxury Motors. He'll see what he rejected isn't a joke." Karoline eyed the car, then him, a flicker of worry in her gaze. "Nicholas, what's your plan? Don't turn this into a flex?" He stepped closer, his hand warm on her shoulder. "Not a flex. I'll buy the Azure coupe you wanted and let him know he was wrong to disrespect you. He thinks you don't belong. I'll show him you're beyond his little bubble." She pressed her lips together. "But if you just buy the car, he'll think he won, that our money doesn't change his mind." Nicholas smirked, a spark igniting his eyes. "Not just the car. I'll invite him to the MAGA Veterans Fundraiser Gala you're hosting next month. He'll face the people he despises, see their true worth. That's how I'll teach him. Not with fists." Karoline laughed, the weight lifting from her chest. "You're smarter than I give you credit for." "I have to be to keep up with you," he replied, pulling her into his arms. His voice softened, a tender vow. "He messed with the wrong person, Karoline. I had nothing once, slept on benches. But I learned a person's worth isn't their looks or beliefs. He needs to learn that, and I'll be the one to show him." She leaned into him, nodding. "You sure?" "Absolutely," he said, stepping back to open the car door. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., I'll be there. You don't need to come. Let me handle it. But you'll love the story." She glanced at the blazing red car, then at him. "All right, I want every detail." Nicholas nodded, his smile a beacon in the night. Morning sunlight bathed Washington, D.C., glinting off Capital Luxury Motors' glass walls. A deep, powerful rumble rolled through the air as the red Rolls-Royce Phantom eased to the entrance. Its $1.5 million presence, a siren's call. A small crowd gathered, phones aloft, whispering, "What a car! Must be someone big." Inside, Blake Thompson stood by the Bentley Continental, adjusting his gray tie, chatting with a wealthy client, still smug from banishing Karoline. He thought he'd won a war. The Rolls-Royce door swung open, and Nicholas Rio stepped out, 59, tall, imposing, in a fitted dark gray suit, his salt and pepper hair neat, his gaze sharp as a hawk's. The fiery red car behind him wasn't just a ride. It was a banner of the MAGA spirit he and Karoline held dear. He strode through the glass doors, the chime lost in the hush that fell over the showroom. Blake's smile froze as he saw Nicholas. Customers and staff paused, eyes riveted on the man who just entered. Daniel, near the reception desk, whispered to a colleague, "Who's that?" "That car's no joke." Blake cleared his throat, stepping forward to block Nicholas, his voice smooth but unsteady. "Hello, sir. I'm Blake Thompson, sales manager. What can I do for you today?" His eyes flicked to the Rolls-Royce, unease creeping in. Nicholas sized him up, his gaze icy yet calm. "I'm Nicholas Rio," he said, his deep voice resonating through the space. "Karoline Leavitt's husband. Yesterday you refused to sell her a car because she's with Trump. I'm here to talk about that." Blake blinked, his mouth gaping, then snapping shut. Whispers spread. The man near the Bentley muttered, "The press secretary's husband?" His wife nodded. "Probably a real tycoon." Blake forced a crooked smile. "Mr. Rio, I'm afraid there's a misunderstanding. We didn't refuse anyone. It was just—" Nicholas cut him off, his voice a blade. "Don't lie. You called her money dirty, said she didn't belong, and kicked her out in front of everyone. I'm not here for excuses. I'm here to buy the Azure coupe she wanted." He pointed to the midnight blue car, eyes never leaving Blake. Blake swallowed, his hand tightening on his tie. "The Azure coupe? Yes, of course. We can—" He stopped, too eager, then faltered. "But I have to ask, are you serious about buying it today? It's a limited edition, not just anyone." Nicholas stepped closer, towering over him. "I'm not asking your opinion. I said I want to buy it. My wife needs it for work, press briefings, White House events. You refused her because you hate Trump, but you don't know who she is, or who I am." Richard Mason, the dealership owner, emerged from the back office. Around 50, in a navy suit, silver hair slicked back, his face taut with anxiety. "Hello, I'm Richard Mason, the owner. Is there a problem?" Nicholas turned, his tone unwavering. "The problem is your manager insulted my wife, Karoline Leavitt, White House press secretary. He refused to sell her a car over politics, humiliated her in front of customers. I'm here to fix that." Blake stammered, "Mr. Rio, I didn't mean to offend. We just prioritize socially conscious clients." Nicholas spun back, his glare piercing. "Socially conscious? You think kicking out a woman who represents millions of Americans is noble? You know nothing about her. Trump intern, congressional candidate, now the youngest press secretary ever. And you, just a car salesman playing judge." Richard raised a hand, voice trembling. "Mr. Rio, I apologize for this misunderstanding. We don't want to lose customers. You want the Azure? I'll handle it personally." Nicholas nodded, eyes still cold. "Good. I want the paperwork done today. But I'm not finished with him." He pointed at Blake, now pale. "You thought you won by kicking her out. You'll see the consequences." Blake's voice shook. "Consequences? What are you going to do?" Nicholas smirked, a smile sharp as winter wind. "I'm not ruining you, but you'll learn your liberalism doesn't give you the right to disrespect people." He turned to Richard. "Get the car ready. I'll tell him what's next." The showroom held its breath, Blake's ragged gas cutting through the silence. Nicholas stood tall, his gaze a vice on Blake, who wilted under the words, "You'll see the consequences." The Rolls-Royce outside still drew stares, but inside the standoff owned the room. Richard wiped sweat from his brow, his voice unsteady. "Mr. Rio, we'll get the Azure sorted right away. I'm so sorry about yesterday with Miss Leavitt." Nicholas nodded, eyes on Blake. "Good. I want the paperwork done today. My wife needs the car for work. She doesn't have time for petty games." He stepped to the Azure coupe, tracing its hood with a lover's touch, then turned back. "But I'm not just here to buy a car. You insulted her, and I'm not letting that slide." Richard interjected. "Mr. Rio, I assure you this won't happen again. Blake was just—" Nicholas cut him off. "Don't defend him. He called her money dirty, kicked her out like a troublemaker. I had nothing once, slept on benches, but I never judged people for their beliefs." "He did." Blake stepped back, eyes darting. I have the right to choose customers. Nicholas's dry laugh echoed. Your right ends when you humiliate others. You think you're better because you're progressive? You know nothing about her. Trump intern to press secretary, breaking every barrier. And you, a car salesman, deciding who's worthy? Daniel whispered to a colleague. He's right, Blake flushed. You don't get it. We don't want MAGA ties. Nicholas's stare silenced him. Don't want? Then why are you still here when I roll up in a Rolls-Royce? Think I'm not socially conscious enough? He pointed to the red beast outside. I built Rio Enterprises from scratch, own property across New England. My wife and I don't need to prove anything to you, but you'll learn a lesson today. Richard stepped forward, pleading, Mr. Rio, I apologize for Blake. We'll sell the Azure at the best price, no fees. Nicholas raised a hand. I'll buy it, but not to make him happy. I'm buying it because Karoline needs it. Where's the paperwork? Richard gestured to Daniel. Get the papers. Daniel rushed off while Blake stood frozen, hands clenched. Nicholas turned to Blake, voice low and firm. I could buy this dealership and fire you today, but I won't. Instead, you'll attend the Veterans Fundraiser Gala Karoline's hosting next month. You'll volunteer, meet the people you despise, see their worth. That's how you'll learn respect. Blake stammered. Volunteer? I don't. You will, Nicholas cut in, or I'll make sure no customer wants you. Your choice. Blake fell silent, pale, eyes on the floor. Richard interjected. Blake will do it, I guarantee. Daniel returned with the papers, handing them to Nicholas. He reviewed them, nodded. Good. I want the car delivered to Karoline within 24 hours. He signed swiftly, handed them back, then gave Blake a final look. You thought you won by kicking her out. You were wrong. Your liberalism doesn't make you better. He turned to Richard. All done? Yes, sir. Delivered on time, Richard replied. Nicholas walked to the doors, shoes clicking, leaving Blake trembling as whispers swirled, some approving, others stunned at his fall. A month later, the Grand Hyatt Hotel in D.C. glowed for the Veterans Fundraiser Gala, hosted by Karoline Leavitt. American flags and MAGA banners adorned the Grand Hall, alive with veterans, families, and donors mingling in a symphony of pride. Tables overflowed with food, a band played patriotic tunes, and the air thrummed with honor. Karoline, in an elegant navy dress, stood near the stage, her MAGA necklace glinting as she spoke with former servicemen, her eyes alight with gratitude. Near the entrance, Blake Thompson appeared, not in his gray suit, but a black polo with a volunteer badge. He pushed a wheelchair for Tom, a 30-year-old veteran who'd lost a leg in combat. All right, I'll grab you some water, Blake said softly, his smugness gone, replaced by a quiet awkwardness. Nicholas had forced him here, and weeks among those he'd scorned were softening his edges. Karoline stepped off the stage, spotting Blake. She smiled faintly, her heels tapping as she approached. Blake, she called, her tone calm yet teasing. I didn't expect you to show up. Blake paused the wheelchair, flushing. Leavitt, he said, voice low. Your husband didn't give me much choice. Said I'd have no customers left. She nodded, glancing at Tom, who smiled. Thanks for being here today, Tom, she said, then turned to Blake. So how's it feel working with these people? Is it what you thought? Blake's eyes dropped, then he sighed. Number I thought MAGA was all showy, clueless types. But meeting people like Tom, I was wrong. They're not the enemy I imagine. Karoline crossed her arms, her gaze sharp but kind. You were wrong to judge me by my politics, Blake. You called my money dirty, kicked me out because I'm with Trump. But a person's worth isn't in their politics. It's in how they treat others. Blake nodded slowly. I know. I apologized to Mr. Rio when the car was delivered. But now I'll say it to you. I was wrong, Miss Leavitt. No excuse for how I treated you. She smiled. No sarcasm, just grace. No need for excuses, just that you've learned something. That's enough. Tom chimed in, cheerful. Blake's not bad, Miss Leavitt. Helped me shoot hoops yesterday. Still clumsy, though. Blake laughed, his eyes brightening. Nicholas emerged, tall in a black suit, hands in pockets, placing one on Karoline's shoulder. Seeing him work here, I've got to admit he's trying, he said to her, then turned to Blake. So is this gala what you thought MAGA was about? Blake shook his head. No, sir. I thought it'd be all flash, but it's about community. People like Tom. Nicholas nodded, voice deep. Good, I had nothing once. Slept penniless on streets. But I learned worth isn't in looks or beliefs, it's in actions. You were wrong to disrespect Karoline, but you're making it right. I respect that. He paused. My company needs new cars. If you keep changing, I'll let you handle that deal. Blake blinked, stunned. You serious, Mr. Rio? Nicholas smirked. I don't joke about business. Up to you. Karoline cut in. The Azure's serving me well, delivered on time, no issues. But next time, don't let politics cloud your job. Blake nodded, earnest. I won't. Thank you, Miss Leavitt, Mr. Rio. The gala rolled on, laughter and music filling the air. Blake wheeled Tom to the buffet, his demeanor softer, while Karoline and Nicholas watched. Think he's really changed? She asked. Nicholas chuckled. Maybe, but if not, I'll make him remember you're the most important thing to me. She leaned into him, smiling. I know. This tale of Karoline and Nicholas at Capital Luxury Motors mirrors America's 2025 divide, where beliefs clash with humanity. Karoline denied the Azure Coupe for her MAGA stance, faced Blake's scorn, a progressive blind to his own intolerance. She and Nicholas, with their fiery Rolls-Royce in the gala, proved their worth through action, not vengeance. Blake's shift, sparked by Tom, shows that respect can bridge divides. In a polarized world, choose dialogue over disdain. Let your deeds, like Karoline driving the Azure through DC, define you. If this story of love, resilience, and redemption stirred your heart, hit subscribe for more MAGA journeys. Thanks for joining me. See you in the next tale.